Hey guys, it's Jackstown and welcome back to another video. So the NBA Finals are upon us. Game 2 between my LA Lakers and the Miami Heat are about 1 hour away at the time of making this video. By the time you watch it, it's probably after Game 2, but that's okay. We're still in the midst of the NBA Finals, and this is the favorite time of year for all NBA fans because, you know, we get to look back on all the great moments of the past and see which champion will be crowned this year, of course, and because there have been so many finals of the past, obviously, that means that each one is going to be different in terms of the big moments and the moments overall, you know, the stakes involved and just how memorable it is overall. And that's what made me decide to make this video because I've already done a couple tier list videos on the channel already. I love doing tier list videos, and not every NBA Finals series is created equal, so that got me thinking to rank each one based, obviously, like I said, on the big moments, the stakes involved, and just how memorable it is overall. And the tiers that are given on this tier list is GOAT, Great, Good, Fine, and Bad, and I like that. So I get to pick the finals of the last 30 years, of course. Oh, actually, because this tier list only goes back to 1990, which I think is appropriate because it would be such a long video if I was ranking every NBA Finals. But, you know, I like the tier list and the way this tier list is set up overall. I would say I like it. So, and of course, this is just my opinion. So let me know in the comments below your opinions on which series belongs where. And if you like sports, make sure to hit that subscribe button because this channel is for you. Also, turn notifications on. I would really appreciate it. So without further ado, here's my NBA Finals tier list. Okay, so the way that this tier list is presented, it's not in chronological order, which is kind of weird. So it starts off with 2010, but that's okay. We'll just do it the way that it's presented. All right, so we're starting off with the 2010 NBA Finals, and this is a very memorable one, near and dear to me because this was between my Lakers and the Boston Celtics. This was a great series. It went to 7 games, and I remember Ron Artest in Game 7 hit the go-ahead shot to pretty much put the game away. It was a great series overall. Legacy's on the line, and, you know, people thought, could Kobe go back-to-back? You know, is this going to be a mini dynasty or whatever? And, you know, the Celtics were an unlikely finals opponent. I believe they were the 4th seed that year. The Lakers were the 1 seed in the West. And overall, it was just a great finals. I think every game was close, exciting, and obviously the rivalry between the Lakers and Celtics is always entertaining. So I would say this was a great finals, for sure. All right, the 2006 NBA Finals between the Dallas Mavericks and the Miami Heat. This was the first title that the Heat won as a franchise and Shaq's first title outside of LA, teaming up with Dwayne Wade, of course, who was the Finals MVP. Now, this was a really good series because the Mavericks were up 2-0, I believe, and the Heat won 4 in a row, came back, and it was one of the best Finals comebacks of all time. And Dwayne Wade just turned into, like, the Flash, a superhero, like a true superhero, actually, in those games. Like, he was averaging like 30 points a game. That was really his coming out party, where everyone said, you know, this guy's a superstar. So I would say this was a good finals, or I'm on the border of good and great. Compared to the 2010 finals, I don't think it's in the same level as that. So I'm gonna say this is good, but it was a really entertaining finals. All right. 2005, this was between the Pistons and the Spurs, I believe. This went to 7 games, a lot of low-scoring defensive games, and this is when the Spurs denied the Pistons of going back-to-back, and of course, like I said, it went to 7 games. Great series. I remember Big Shot Bob, Robert Horry, hit a lot of big shots in that series, really helped them out, and they ended up winning in 7 in a really low-scoring game, old-school defensive, physical game, and I would say this was a great NBA Finals, so that belongs in the great tier. Okay. NBA Finals 2000. So this was between the Lakers and the Pacers. This was, of course, the first of the three-peat between with Kobe and Shaq won together. First title of their 3 in a row. And this was a good series. I believe it was 4-2 Lakers. And actually, I think Kobe's coming out party came in this series, in my opinion. It was Game 4. Lakers were up 2-1. And the Pacers were coming back to try to tie the series. They were really fighting hard. The game went to overtime. And Shaq fouled out. And then Kobe hit like 3 shots in a row. And everyone started to say, hey, this guy's a superstar. So I think that was his coming out party. I would say this was a good finals because even though it was close, like, it never really seemed in doubt that the Lakers would actually lose the series. Like, even though the games were close, a couple of them actually weren't, but overall it was a good series. It did go to 6 games. It was pretty competitive, so I would say it was a good series. All right, NBA Finals 2003. So this was between the New Jersey Nets and the San Antonio Spurs. I think this went to 6 games. Sometimes I forget. I think it's either 6 or 7, but I'm pretty sure it's 6. I'll have to fact check on that. I'll probably let you know after I edit this video whether it went to 6 or 7, but I think this was a good series. I know Tim Duncan went off, and David Robinson had a really nice series, or this was actually his last year, so his second title, and it was a good way to close out his career. And the Nets went to back-to-back finals, and they lost both of them, unfortunately for them. But this was a pretty good series. I know Tim Duncan had one game where he almost had a quadruple-double, but I don't think it belongs in the great tier, or alongside 2010 and 2005, but it still was a very good series. All right. 2008. I'm on the fence about this one because this was between the Celtics and Lakers. This was the only title in the Doc Rivers Big Three era. Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen. Of course, Rondo deserves some mentioning too because I think that arguably could have been a Big Four. But this was the first time Kobe got to the finals without Shaq, and they lost 4-2 to the Celtics. And they were about to tie the series at 2 in Game 4, but the Celtics came back from an incredible deficit, or a huge deficit, 24 points, I think. It was one of the greatest comebacks of all time, and I just remember being so upset as a kid watching this. But it was a great series. Celtics hadn't won a title in 2 decades, and they won, so I think this deserves to be a great series. Okay, moving on. Now, this next one is, I can't tell, is this 2002? Because the logo looks similar to 2000, and I see 2001 down here already. So I can only assume this is 2002. Let me just check real quick. Let me just look through each one. Is it 2002? Yes, this is 2002. Okay. This is going to be a bad finals, in my opinion. Even though my Lakers won, this was the third finals in a row they won. This completed their three-peat over the New Jersey Nets, but this was a sweep, and the Lakers played the Kings the series before. That was really memorable. That went to 7 games, and I think everyone knew that year that the winner of that series would go on to win the title because the West was so much better than the East. So I definitely think that it was uncompetitive. The Lakers had no chance of losing that series, let alone maybe even one game. I think a lot of people thought it was going to be a sweep, and of course it was. So that one is unfortunately for unbiased NBA fans or objective NBA fans or pretty much non-Laker fans, that is a bad finals. So it belongs there. 1994 NBA Finals. This one is definitely a great series. This was between the Houston Rockets and the New York Knicks, the first title for Olajuwon and the Rockets in their franchise history. It was over Patrick Ewing's Knicks in 7 games. It was a great series. The Knicks were up 3-2. The Rockets came back and won the 2 games at home. It was just really close, just a great series overall. And I remember during, I think, Game 5 or Game 6, the whole O.J. Simpson car chase was happening, and that gave the finals even more of a media boost because it was happening during the game. And I don't know, I remember that aspect of it, and also it was just a really memorable series. It was a great series, and that was the closest, unfortunately, Patrick Ewing got to a title. He was never able to win one, but I still think it was a great series, no matter what side you were on, or just for the objective NBA fan. Okay, 2004 NBA Finals. Now this one hurts because it was the Lakers and the Pistons, and the Pistons beat the Lakers 4-1. Actually, the Lakers were heavily favored over the Pistons, and not only was it surprising that the Pistons won the series, but they kind of destroyed the Lakers. They won 4-1, and a couple of the games were close, but the Pistons totally completely looked like the better team, and they won. And I would say this was a good series because, it was still hearing an underdog story is always nice in sport. I always like an underdog story, and it was exciting because I feel like pretty much everyone other than Laker fans were rooting for the Pistons to kind of end the Shaq and Kobe era, and actually did. It was the last year they were together, so it was a good series, even though it was 4-1, a gentleman's sweep. All right, the 98 Finals. This one was great in my opinion because this was, of course, the 6th title for Michael Jordan and the Bulls, and their second three-peat, and this is the one where Michael Jordan went to 6 games against the Jazz. 2nd year in a row, the Bulls played the Jazz. Michael Jordan obviously strips the ball from Karl Malone, goes all the way down the court, crosses up Brian Russell's pulls up mid-range shot, perfect swish, and it was just he holds the motion. It's almost something like a scene from a movie. It was just such a perfect end to Jordan's career in Chicago, and it was a great series. And I think because it's just so memorable, that moment, and how it was the end of probably the greatest dynasty of all time in NBA history, that's why for me it's a great series. Okay. 1993 NBA Finals. This is when Jordan finished his first three-peat, and I think this was a good series. Not a great one because the Bulls were up 3-1 on the Suns, Charles Barkley's Suns. His only chance at a championship, the only time he got to the finals. But the Charles Barkley won MVP, and it was overall a close series. But the most memorable moment, was John Paxson hitting that game-winning shot to win Game 6. And I think it was a very entertaining, very good series, but it doesn't belong in the same tier as the great ones, but it still was a good series. All right, NBA Finals 2019. This was last year's NBA Finals. Now, this was what ended the Warriors dynasty, or who knows, maybe they'll come back next year, but it ended that run that the Warriors had. Kevin Durant obviously was hurt. Klay Thompson hurt himself in Game 4, and a lot of Warrior fans, or honestly a lot of non-Raptor fans, will say the Raptors got lucky because even though they had Kawhi and they had a great team, that they were very fortunate that the Warriors were injured, and that if without their injuries they wouldn't have won. And I agree with that, but my argument is also when you get to the finals 5 years in a row, there's gonna be fatigue, and fatigue a lot of times leads to injuries. So even though it was unfortunate for them, it seemed inevitable that you can't just like keep getting to the finals year after year after year without some kind of adversity or some obstacle eventually getting in your way. So I think the Raptors, do deserve the title, and it was their first title. It was a great series. It went to 6 games. Well, actually, I'm gonna say it's a good series. It was very entertaining though. First championship for a team outside of the United States, so that was pretty historic. And of course, it was last year, so it's going to be memorable. People have short memories, or they obviously remember the more recent series more. All right, 2011 NBA Finals. Now, this one was really tough for LeBron. This is probably the lowest point in LeBron's career, honestly. The Heat against the Mavs. Obviously, this is probably one of the most memorable series, and for that reason, I'm going to say it was great, because of how memorable it was. And the reason why I say that is because LeBron melted down historically. I think he had like 3 fourth quarters in a row where he scored like 4 points or less. He honestly like choked. He shied away from the big moment. And the Mavericks, who were not the Heat were heavily favored, ended up losing to the Mavs. After winning Game 1, I believe they lost 4 out of the next 5. Dirk Nowitzki was great. Congrats to him. That was his only championship. I'm happy he got one, because I always like to see superstars and Hall of Fame players break through and finally win. I hate to hear the stories about like the Patrick Ewings and Charles Barkleys who'd never win, Reggie Miller, so it was great that Dirk got his title, but it was a low point for LeBron. And at this point, after this series, I remember how much hate LeBron, or how much criticism LeBron was getting for what happened, but it was a great series because of how memorable it was. Okay, the Cavs and Warriors. I believe this is 2017, because the other one that has KD and LeBron, well, hang on. Let me think. Okay, actually, no, because the Kyrie Irving was not in 2018. So the series between the Cavs and Warriors that had Kyrie Irving was either 2016 or 17, and 2016 is right here. So process of elimination, it is 2017. And this was not a good series. Honestly, I'm going to say this was a bad series, because the Warriors, this was the first year they had KD. They swept their way through the entire West. They almost went fo, like Moses Malone said. They swept the first 3 rounds, and they almost swept the Cavs to go perfect 16-0 in the finals. After going up 3-0, the Cavs ended up winning Game 4 to help save the embarrassment, but there was no doubt the Warriors were the better team, and they were kind of the villain team, or Kevin Durant was the villain. So other than Warrior fans, no one was really rooting for them. So a lot of NBA fans didn't like this finals, and it wasn't that exciting at all. I didn't really enjoy the finals that much this year. But, every NBA Finals is worth watching anyways, but this was a bad finals, compared to the others at least. All right, 2012. This is the one after LeBron choked. He turned the tides, and he ended up being the difference maker and winning his first title for the Miami Heat. And this was a great moment for him, and that's why it's so memorable, because it was LeBron's first championship. Everyone wanted him to finally break through and win it, or the LeBron fans did. He was still kind of a villain for going to Miami, but it was a great moment for him, and I would say I'm going to say it was a good finals, not a great finals, because it was 4-1. They beat the Thunder in this series. It was 4-1. Thunder won Game 1, but then the Heat won 4 in a row, so it wasn't like nail-biting or down to the wire, but it was still very memorable. All right, the 96 NBA Finals. This was the Bulls, in my opinion, the greatest team of all time. The Bulls went 72-10 the year first full year Michael Jordan came back after retiring to go play baseball. They played the Seattle Supersonics with Shawn Kemp and Gary Payton, who were a great team also. And the Bulls went up 3-0, but then the Sonics actually ended up winning 2 in a row to make it 3-2, kind of competitive. And then the Bulls showed that they were the more dominant, better team. I'm going to say this was a good series. It did go to 6 games, and it's memorable because even Michael Jordan said it was his sweetest title, because he proved all the doubters wrong, that he could come back, and he still had it, and he won the whole thing. So that was a memorable series. Okay. 2013. I'm almost tempted to put this as the GOAT, but there's one other series that I think earns the nod over this one. But this was one of the best series. I think, yeah, this was definitely one of the best series of the last 30 years, one of the best series I've ever seen. This was between the Miami Heat and the San Antonio Spurs. This was LeBron's second title in a row, but this was so down to the wire. And I remember the Spurs surprisingly got to the finals because the West was really hurt that year, but they were a really good team, under the radar, well coached, obviously, Greg Popovich and Tim Duncan, Tony Parker Ginobili, the core that had won the 4 titles together, or 3 titles together, and it was down to the wire. They were up 3-2 in the series, and Spurs fans don't want to be reminded of this, but they were winning in Game 6, going to win the series in 6 games probably, until Ray Allen hit the game-tying shot, probably the clutchest shot in the history of the NBA, to tie the game, send it in overtime. Heat won in overtime and ended up winning Game 7 to win the series in 7. It was an epic series. I mean, there's nothing else you can say. Definitely great, no question. All right. The finals between the Heat and the Warriors. This was the first meeting of 4 in a row. This was between, like I said, Heat and Warriors. 2015, first year that LeBron was a Cav. The Warriors kind of surprised everyone this year because they were a playoff team the last 2 years, but they were the 6th seed in the West, so they made that huge jump under Steve Kerr. First year Steve Kerr was the coach, and it was a really good series. I think I don't think it was great, but I think it was good. I think the Warriors, this was the beginning of their dynasty, their run. And this is pretty much when Steph Curry kind of became like a global icon and won the title. Okay, 1997 NBA Finals. This is another good finals. I think it went to 6 games. It was Bulls and Jazz, the first of 2, but I think the reason why this wasn't as great as the second one is because how it ended, how it completed the dynasty and the final moments of Game 6 of 1998 was more memorable. So I'm going to say this was a good series. It was a 6-game series, so obviously it has to be good or somewhat competitive for each team to win at least 2 games. And this was Michael Jordan's 5th title over the Utah Jazz. Okay. 2016. All right, this is the one, guys. In my opinion, this is the best finals since 1990 and the best series I've ever seen in my life. Not even final series, like NBA playoff series. It was just so great. I mean, just so memorable. Everyone was kind of rooting for... Okay, I don't want to say everyone, but I was rooting for LeBron to win a title for Cleveland. You know, Cleveland had like a 52-year sports drought between baseball, football, and basketball, and LeBron finally delivered on his promise to win a title for Cleveland, and it was in the most epic fashion. The Warriors' 73-9 best regular season record. Of course, you NBA fans obviously know this. It's nothing you haven't heard before, but of course, the Cavs were down 3-1. Looked like the Warriors were going to seal they're going to clinch the title and prove that they were the best team of all time. But LeBron said, not so fast. Came back. He was incredible the last 3 games. So was Kyrie Irving, who hit the go-ahead 3-pointer in Game 7 and won the series, and the first team to ever come back from 3-1. The stakes involved and the fact that, I mean, the only team to come back from 3-1, 7 games, epic series. LeBron kind of cemented his legacy as one of the greatest of all time after this, and just a series that I don't think anyone's ever going to forget. So I think that's the greatest final series, at least in the last 30 years, or on this tier list. So I think that's the GOAT. All right, 1991 NBA Finals. This was the first title for Michael Jordan, and this is why it was significant, because even though it was 4-1 Bulls over Magic's Lakers, Magic's last trip to the finals, I think what makes it significant more than the series, even though, because the series, it looked like the Lakers were clearly overmatched by the Bulls, is that this was the changing of the guard. This is when Michael Jordan kind of took over Magic Johnson's role as the best player in the NBA, in my opinion. So... and I actually think a lot of people will agree with that. And the Bulls actually lost Game 1, but then they came back to win 4 in a row. And Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan just locked down Magic Johnson and the Lakers. They had no chance after Game 1, but it was the start of a dynasty. It was the beginning of a dynasty, changing of the guard. So it was definitely a good series, and I think it deserves that. Wow, we have a lot of good series, not a lot of fine or bad series. Or I think that's the way it should be. I'd rather have a good final series. All right, moving on. 2018 NBA Finals. This was another bad series. This was very similar to 2017. I think the last 2 years were pretty much uncompetitive because Kevin Durant kind of ruined the NBA those 2 years because no one really wanted him to be there anyways. And it just looked like no other team would even have a chance against the Warriors, including the Cavs, even though this might have been LeBron's best year overall because they were the 4 seed, the Cavs. They had so many struggles. They pretty much traded everyone at the deadline. People were, I mean, they had a really rough start to the season. Everyone was kind of, there was a lot of criticism towards that Cavs team for underperforming or being a big disappointment or whatever. But LeBron pretty much put that team on his back more than he ever has, I think, in his career. And as a 4 seed, he got them through the East and they got to the finals, which was already a great accomplishment, but everyone knew they had no chance, and people were calling sweep before the series even started, and that's exactly what happened. So that is a bad series in my opinion. All right. 2009 finals. This one was fine, in my opinion. The first fine. And even though I'm happy with the result, Laker fan here, you know, the Lakers beating the Magic 4-1. This was a big series for Kobe because he proved that he could get a title without Shaq. This was his first title as the #1 option, like undisputed #1 option. And it was over Dwight Howard's Magic, who had a great run to the finals, but they were overmatched because they were so young. And it just seemed like the Lakers overall were the better team. And the combination of Kobe, Gasol, experience was just too much for the Magic. Even though it was entertaining, there were a couple close games. I think 2 overtime games in that series, but a couple of them were also blowouts, and it just looked like the Lakers were the better team. It was 4-1, like I said, so that one is a fine series for the objective NBA fan, of course. All right, 1990 NBA Finals. This was the Pistons' second title, or the Bad Boy Pistons' second title in a row over the Portland Trailblazers. This was, other than Vinny the Microwave Johnson hitting the game-winning shot in Game 5 to seal the series, this was not a very good series, or it wasn't a great series. It wasn't, pretty much non-competitive. Clearly the Bad Boys were the better team. The Pistons were the better team, so I'm going to say it's fine. It's funny, we had back-to-back fine tiers after not having not having any fine tiers before this. Okay, 2007 NBA Finals. This was a bad series, unfortunately. This was LeBron's first trip to the finals, but he was too young and overmatched on the Cleveland Cavaliers, obviously, against the San Antonio Spurs. Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, all in their prime, more experienced, and they swept them uncompetitive, unfortunately. All right, 1999 NBA Finals. This was another, I'm going to say this is a fine series because this one was between the Spurs, who were the 1 seed, and the unlikely, improbable, probably the greatest underdog story in NBA history, 8-seeded Knicks that got to the finals without Patrick Ewing, their best player, obviously. It was an amazing run, and I think that's what makes it memorable, and that's why it's not a bad series. But like a lot of the other series in bad and fine tier, the Knicks were just totally overmatched by the Spurs. They were clearly the better team, and the Spurs and a young Tim Duncan had their first championship in franchise history, and Tim Duncan was the finals MVP and got his first of 5 championships and started his illustrious career off on a high note in just his second year winning the championship. All right, 1992 NBA Finals. This is another one. Okay, no, this was between the Blazers and the Bulls. Michael Jordan was pretty much compared to Clyde Drexler, or him and Clyde Drexler, sorry, were the 2 best shooting guards at the time in many people's eyes. And Michael Jordan just blew him away in the finals, just destroyed the Blazers. He was just so hot from Game 1. I think he scored like 55 points. And it was pretty uncompetitive. Even though the Blazers got 2 games, it never really seemed in doubt. But I'm going to say it's between fine and good. This was also another fine series. 1995 NBA Finals. Now, this was a sweep. The Rockets as a 6 seed, still the lowest seed to ever win a championship, over the young Orlando Magic, who were actually favored with Penny and Shaq. Those were the good old days for Magic fans. I'm sure they'll tell you that. But even though the Rockets were the lower seed, they were more experienced, and that was because they won the year before, and this was Clyde Drexler's only title. They went back-to-back, and these were the only 2 titles in franchise history, and the Magic let the series slip away from Game 1. It's kind of like J.R. Smith's epic mistake in 2018 where he didn't shoot the ball off that rebound, he just cleared the ball. Nick Anderson for the Magic in what was they were up 3, he missed 2 free throws, then he got his own rebound and missed 2 more free throws, and then the Rockets ended up winning that game in overtime, and that was a devastating loss that the Magic never recovered from in that series. So for that, that's why I think it was still a competitive series, but that's why it's not a bad series. Even though it was a sweep, it was fine. All right, so let me just put it there. All right, last 2. 2001 NBA Finals. Now, this one was really memorable in Game 1. The Game 1 was the most memorable game because that was when Allen Iverson, his only trip to the finals, he went off. This was his MVP season, so he was just probably the best scorer in the league at the time. He just crossed up Ty Lue and stepped over him, and they won the game in overtime, making people think that they actually had a chance over the heavily favored Lakers. But the Lakers ended up winning 4 in a row. Shaq was dominant, and this was their second of 3 titles. So they just proved they were the better team. It wasn't a bad series because of the memorable Game 1, one of the most memorable games of all time, and performances by Allen Iverson, but it deserves to be in fine. All right, And the last but not least, the 2014 finals, the second meeting in a row between the San Antonio Spurs and the Miami Heat. And unfortunately, because a lot of people thought this would be another great series because of the 7-game series from the year before in 2013, unfortunately, this did not live up to the hype at all. The Spurs actually got their revenge, and they blew out the Heat, as Skip Bayless likes to say, by a record finals margin. Seemingly all 4 games they won were by double digits, and like 2 of them were by like 20 points in Miami. So that is a bad series, unfortunately. But yeah, because it just LeBron was, even though, and this was kind of by everyone's surprise because the Heat were going for the three-peat, and the Spurs just killed them. They just played so well as a team. No individual stars, but they just played so beautifully as a team. Old school basketball. Probably Greg Popovich's best coaching job, in my opinion, that won them the championship. And Tim Duncan's 5th title. And the franchise's 5th title as well. All right, guys, that's going to do it. This one was kind of longer than I expected, but I just love talking about the NBA Finals. Big NBA fan here, of course. And so that's going to do it, guys. Again, leave in the comments your opinion on where each finals belongs. If you love sports, make sure to hit that like button if you like the video. And if you like sports, make sure to hit that subscribe button, turn notifications on. I would really appreciate and love all your support. Thanks again, guys, and I'll see you all later.